I talk a lot about how the big problem with the corporate media is that they're like 3 to 6 months behind actual news. So like if you read news on Twitter, you know stuff instantly as it happens because people are tweeting about it. But the corporate press, especially if it's news that's inconvenient to, some of their sponsors, will drag their feet on news until it's like 6 to 8 months after the fact. Like we've all known that what's going on in let's just say Eastern Europe on the border of a very large country that the US had fought a Cold War with. We all know that that's tragically, fragile and falling apart. But if you've been watching the press, they're like, we're winning, victories on our side, and we gotta, but eventually, and you're starting to see it trickle through now, the press will come around to like, oh yeah, that was garbage. So this is one of those instances where fact checkers in Snopes came around to the truth 7 years after the fact. And I want to start this video by saying, I really love Tim Pool's show, and I love that he has a diversity of views. But you're going to see one of his cohorts here, Phil, is just like has an absolutely ridiculous mind, and I'll just leave it at that. But watch this clip real quick, and this is them talking about Snopes' sudden reversal on this thing about Trump, praising white supremacists.
Did not call neo-Nazis and white supremacists very fine people. Published June 20th, 2024.
Media Matters most affected.
Literally.
Yes, literally.
About something that happened in 2017.
And the Media Matters, some of the Media Matters, some of the alumni from the Media Matters were out in force claiming that Donald Trump did. No, Snopes, you're wrong, that he was there, blah, blah, blah. If that's the case, you're on the side of commies and you're responsible for the 100 million dead.
We got to show.
Okay. This guy is literally, how the right will make fun of the left for being completely batshit insane, like they blue hair people that think that there's 17 genders, they're just crazy. Phil here is the right-wing version of that. Like every problem in the world is because of the left, and the left is so evil and authoritarian. And we're gonna take a side branch into that, but let's kind of stick with the theme first about how Snopes just barely corrected the facts on a smear against Trump.
We got to show this. Okay, so it says on August 15th, 2017, good 7 years ago, there's some 7-year-old kid who's like, let's be real. There's like a 14-year-old kid who is just now like starting to hear stuff on the news.
2017 doesn't feel like it was 7 years ago. That's crazy.
And he was like, I was playing with Play-Doh when this happened, and now it's being fact-checked. But let me read. Then President Donald Trump called neo-Nazis and white supremacists who attended the Charlottesville rally very fine people false. In a news conference, after the rally protesting the planned removal of a Confederate statue, Trump did say they were very fine people on both sides, referring to the protesters and the counter-protesters. He said in the same statement that he wasn't talking about neo-Nazis and white nationalists, who he said should be condemned totally. Editor's note.
Oh, boy.
Some readers have raised the objection that this fact check appears to assume Trump was correct in stating that there were very fine people on both sides of the Charlottesville incident. That is not the case. This fact check aimed to confirm what Trump actually said, not whether what he said was true or false. What? For the record, virtually every source that covered the Unite the Right debacle concluded that it was conceived of, led by, and attended by white supremacists, and that therefore Trump was wrong. This is an opinion statement. This is the most.
So I also covered in a recent stream how one of the main organizers of that Charlottesville protest was a former Obama campaign staffer, which is interesting.
Most nonsensical thing. When Trump says there are very fine people on both sides, it's an opinion statement. You can't be right or wrong. I mean, like, you can have bad opinions, but there is no true or false in the opinion statement. It's, do you agree with Trump's assessment of fine or not? Now, the reality was Trump was correct. There's like a video of a little old lady. She's not a nasty person or a neo-Nazi or anything like that. She's just some little old lady who heard they were going to tear down her statue and she didn't want it to happen. There's a bunch of people like that. They're very fine people. That's it. Now, the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, of course, they're not. They were there, and they intended on violence just like, and not every single one, don't get me wrong, but many of them intended on violence and brought weapons for that matter. I think there's a video of one guy shooting at another guy. So not a good thing in any respect, but it's like Trump gives opinion on people he saw. He's wrong.
Well, he's not allowed to have opinions. Right.
Here's the thing I've noticed, too, about Trump over the years is the media will take him out of context. Like the bloodbath thing, if you remember, is such a great example. When he was talking about recently, this was like a month or a couple months ago, and he said, if I'm not elected, it's going to be a bloodbath. And he was referring to, in context, if you watched, the context around what he says, he's referring to the auto industry because he's talking about EVs. And, my opinion on EVs is definitely, you've probably heard me talk about them, but I like EVs. I think that's obviously the trend of the future, but I don't think you should ban gas cars either. I think people should have a choice. There's also oil lobbies involved in this. There's a lot of propaganda that like, oh, if you drive a EV, you're a friggin' fruit bucket who, only eats like scientific lab grown meat and, only soy boys, like you're a pussy if you drive an EV. So there's propaganda like that, but I'm getting off the rails. The point is the press clearly distorts Trump when they can for, their own gain or some kind of salacious or to smear him as a white supremacist. So this is unsurprising. And this is honestly one of the things, the Charlottesville thing back in the day when I was like, oh, F that guy if he's saying white supremacists are okay. But it was totally taken out of context. And he actually condemned the white supremacists and the Nazis, but he did say there were fine people on both sides because not all of the protesters on the right side were Nazis. Just like not all of the left protesters were Antifa, which are cops.
All of his opinions are bad and wrong.
It's literally just if it is not useful for the narrative that the left wants to portray.
No, it's not. And I think what's crazy is there's no need.
So this guy, Phil, it frustrates me, and Tim does this too, but everything is the left. And we're gonna go into why that's a ridiculous thing to be like, the left.
For that editor's note, Snopes doesn't have the cojones to just own their fact check. Mm-hmm. Your fact check is just facts. You shouldn't have to.
It's them saying.
Yeah, see, what this lady doesn't understand is the audience they've been pandering to for the last several years is very upset that they would come out and say what they just did, which is be honest about the facts of the situation. So their little side note is really just pandering to that audience, despite, they're going to alienate them no matter. You can't say anything in defense of or anything good about Trump, or you're clearly a white supremacist, MAGA, terrorist who wants to overthrow the government on January 6th,
That's cowardice.
We don't like Donald Trump either. We don't like him either. We had to say this thing, but we're still on your side, guys.
Exactly.
That's the state of journalism now, where
That's
you
all
can't
it
even
is.
say they report the facts and they're like, we're so sorry that we had to tell you this.
We're sorry that the truth. We're sorry the truth doesn't align with your attempts to manipulate. But listen, the left
says Trump is still a bad guy.
The left doesn't use language in a way to communicate. They use language to manipulate.
Yes.
That is the point of language to the left. They believe that words contain power and that to use words is to try to exercise power. They don't believe that that you can possibly have an honest conversation.
Listen to this guy. This guy just hates the left because he, just like a lot of people on the left, has been butt-whipped, brainwashed into this caricature of what the left is. And the reality is, this is not the left. What he's talking about with language, do you know where that comes from? Yeah, the left is doing it now, but they're not the left. The Democrats have co-opted that neoconservative infrastructure. There was a guy, and let me see if I can take a sidebar here, Frank Luntz, and he had a book called Words That Work. And this guy was a Republican, 1,000% Republican. And now I believe that this guy is a never Trumper who's kind of gone over to the neoliberal side, the pro, Biden. The Democrats of today are neoconservatives, and I have receipts for that. But real quick, let me just show you that what he's talking about with the manipulation of language is generated by this guy right here, Frank Luntz, the nation's premier communications expert, shares his wisdom on how the words we choose can change the course of business, of politics, and of life in the country. In Words That Work, Luntz offers behind-the-scenes look at how the tactical use of words and phrases affects what we buy, who we vote for, and even what we believe in. With chapters like the 10 rules of successful communication and the 21 words and phrases for the 21st century, he examines how choosing the right words is essential. Nobody is in a better position to explain than Frank Luntz. He used his knowledge of words to help more than 24 Fortune 500 companies grow. He'll tell us why Rupert Murdoch's $6 billion decision to buy DirecTV was smart, because satellite was more cutting edge than digital cable. So this is an old book, and it was released the year Obama became president, August 5th of 2008. So that is the genesis of what this guy is attributing to the left here. And so I want to also show you this. When we talk about the Biden administration being neoconservatives, there is so much of this that people like, this guy Phil, completely gloss over, and honestly I think has been really obscured from view for the most part from a lot of people. And if you look at the Biden administration, people like Victoria Nuland, who resigned recently and is no longer in the Biden Defense Department, but Jake Sullivan, all these people, they all the neoconservatives, the war hawks, moved to the Obama side during the Obama administration. And that's why when Trump rose up as the Republican, nominee, all of the David Frums, the Bill Kristols, Nicole Wallace is on MSNBC now. She was George Bush's press secretary. But I wanted to show you this article I found because this is very, very interesting. And it's from a magazine called Canary, very left-leaning magazine. And the article is by a guy named Peter Bolton, and it came out in July of 2020. Now think back to July of 2020. What was going on then? That was around the time that Bernie got pushed out of the Democratic primary, and Biden was kind of being foisted on us as the Democratic nominee, and Trump was kind of pushing a lot of the neoconservatives to the Democratic Party. So check this out. Bush-era neocons put their weight behind Biden, and that can mean only one thing. I wonder what that is. Let's keep going. Earlier this year, former Vice President Joe Biden effectively won the Democratic primary contest. As the Canary has previously argued, his victory is nothing to celebrate given that his progressive credentials are paper thin. Throughout his political career, Biden has been a prolific supporter of war and cuts to Social Security. He's also a friend of some of the most reactionary elements in the U.S. Congress. Now, his campaign has started receiving funding from former officials of a previous Republican Party administration, and this shows decisively what has long been suspected by progressive political analysts, and commentators, that the U.S. essentially has two right-wing major parties. Ta-da! And this is where people like Phil here just sound stupid when they rant about the left. Yo, Phil, this is not the left. Biden and the Democrats of today are not the left. And if you think that, you're either unintentionally or intentionally stupid. But let's keep going. So 43 alumni for Biden is formed. So this is an article about how a bunch of Bush administration officials, neocons, backed Biden. On 1st of July, a new organization backing Biden and calling itself 43 Alumni for Biden appeared online. The number 43 refers to the U.S.'s 43rd president, George W. Bush, a Republican. Bush's presidency to this day is overwhelmingly associated with neoconservatism and is the so-called Bush doctrine of preemptive war that emerged in the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 attacks. Now, when you read this stuff, doesn't all the crap that's going on overseas make so much more sense now? Like the stuff in Ukraine and the stuff in the Middle East? Because these are the people who are backing the Biden administration. The same people who gave us Afghanistan and Iraq. And Phil is a dumb ass who does not even broach that subject. He's caught in this stupid high school, like, the left, I'm on the right and I'm a tough guy, and the left is, This is not the left, dipshit. As a new generation of never Trumpers, it's not the first time that Trump has been attacked within his own party. When Trump started surging in the Republican Party primaries in 2016, a group of more traditional Republicans opposing him coalesced into the Never Trump movement. Of course, they didn't succeed in stopping him from winning the nomination or the election against Hillary Clinton later that year. The latest move on their part comes amid plummeting approval ratings for President Trump. As the Canary has previously reported, Trump is now trailing Biden by double digits in some polls. This is following his poor handling of the coronavirus pandemic and heavy-handed response to protests connected to the police killing of George Floyd. So remember, this came out in July of 2020 as the campaign against Trump was ramping up with the Democrats, and they had just stomped Bernie and coalesced around Biden, along with the neocons, to get Trump out of office. Time to get real about their motives. It would be wrong, however, to think that the people involved with 43 alumni for Biden are motivated by any of these factors. So what he's saying here is that, Trump's handling of coronavirus and the George Floyd protests is not what motivates these people at all, clearly. Rather, the formation of the group represents a calculated move by the neoconservative wing of the U.S. ruling class. It's an attempt to strengthen the U.S.'s hand on the global stage following damage to its manufactured veneer of credibility during Trump's tenure. So this guy, it's clear as you read this guy does not like Trump. And remember, this came out in 2020. So, he has plenty of good reason not to. I'm not going to hammer on him for that. But that just proves more of the points he's making here are legitimate, because he doesn't even like Trump, and he's telling you that these terrible people are backing Trump's opposition, which is Joe Biden. It's an attempt to strengthen the U.S.'s hand on the global stage following the damage to its manufactured veneer of credibility during Trump's tenure. In other words, they oppose Trump not because of his racism or his constant lying. We're going to get to his racism in a minute, which I think is largely also manufactured. But because he is too erratic to properly govern the U.S.'s imperial apparatus. At the same time, his crudeness, buffoonery, and unhinged modus operandi have turned the U.S. into a laughingstock. They've also alienated traditional mainstream allies in the process, particularly those in Western Europe. Even that kind of framing there, I believe, is somewhat manufactured by the corporate press. And especially now, looking back in retrospect, but I don't think he's wrong. He's basically telling you, we all know there was an organized effort from both parties to get this guy out of there. I'm just showing you that a very heavy neoconservative element was part of that. Let's keep going. As a result of these factors, the neocon wing of U.S. politics prefers Biden. I almost said perverts. He is already perverted. Prefers Biden because Biden will prove to be a more competent, consistent, and above all, reliable administrator of the U.S.'s empire. After all, he served as vice president during the Barack Obama presidency, and as Canary has already argued on multiple occasions, Obama's presidency was one of the most reactionary in U.S. history, one that largely continued and even escalated many of the policies of George W. Bush, including, or perhaps even especially, in the realm of foreign policy. So this guy is clearly not a, stock and trade Democrat either. He's obviously not a fan of Trump, but look at this. He's got his breakdown of Obama. Obama's sordid record. This record includes launching 10 times as many covert drone assassinations as Bush, orchestrating regime change in Libya, and in the process turning the country into a medieval throwback, playing a hand in the 2009 coup in Honduras, as well as aiding successive post-coup governments, imposing crippling sanctions on the democratically elected government of Venezuela, which we saw Trump helped install a fake president that they didn't accept, Juan Guaido, keeping open the infamous Guantanamo Bay detention center in which people are held indefinitely without charge and frequently subjected to torture, and increasing troop numbers in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that's a very clear-eyed look back at the Obama era. But let's keep going. Hillary Clinton played a leading role in some of these policies. Remember, she was his Secretary of Defense as Obama's Secretary of State between 2009 and 2013. And it was for this reason that, like Biden now, she was the preferred choice of the traditional Washington foreign policy establishment in the 2016 presidential election. As a matter of fact, she even sought the endorsement of the notorious war criminal Henry Kissinger as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor under the presidency of Richard Nixon. Kissinger served as the architect of some of the U.S.'s worst foreign atrocities. People forget this, especially Phil here. Final slide here of this two rival wings of a rogue state. And this is a great summary here. In case there was any remaining doubt following the defeat of Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary, this latest episode perfectly demonstrates how the Democratic Party is terminally unreformable. This guy sounds like Jimmy Dore. In short, the two major U.S. parties now essentially represent rival wings of an imperialist and neoliberal status quo, and they take turns to govern a rogue state that increasingly resembles a fully fledged terrorist enterprise. With someone like Trump, now the major leading figure in the Republican Party, the U.S. now has one right-wing party and one far-right party that borders on the fascistic. Clearly, the U.S. desperately needs a third political force to challenge this wretched hegemony. Now, that guy kind of just basically laying it out like it is. I have covered this in past streams. The interview that Trump did with Tim Pool, let me see if I can find it, where he says, I don't want any more wars. Let's see if this will play.
See wars. I don't want to see wars.
Who is saying that on the campaign trail? We don't want to see wars. I don't want to see wars. That kind of candor, again, is probably why they have 4 court cases open against the guy right now. This is my short.
There's no wars other than we finished a war with ISIS and we completed it, 100% complete. But I don't want to see wars. I think it's so horrible, so unnecessary, so costly in terms of lives and money in that order, and destroying these countries. You know, you're destroying culture. When you look at Ukraine, that would have never happened if I were president. You look at the October 7th attack on Israel, it would have never happened.
Why?
That part right there is so key, where he says we're destroying culture. That, I mean, to me, that makes it real obvious that the case against Trump and the things that he says have been so distorted. And so I just, when you see this, you cross the kind of narrative about him in the press, and then you see him making comments like that. He definitely says other stuff that might be counter to that. But to me, the reason that the press is so aligned against him is because of this factor right here, as we just covered with this Canary article about the neocons aligning behind the Democrats. It's just too obvious to me that this is why they oppose him more than anything. And to me, this issue alone is a reason I think I'm totally fine with him winning over Biden, and I might even consider voting for him because of this alone, because he's a loose cannon on the war state.